The Legend of Zelda, Shadows of the Eternal, Chapter 1, A Dream Beneath the Leaves. The first light of morning spilled through the window of the small cottage at the edge of Orden Village, casting golden stripes across the wooden floor. A breeze whispered in from the nearby woods, ruffling the curtains and bringing with it the scent of dew-drenched earth, wildflowers, and something else, something older. Link stirred beneath his blanket, caught between the last clutches of a dream and the dawn. In that dream, he had stood beneath a canopy of stars beside a broken spring, its waters black as obsidian, its guardian statues worn to hollow stumps. And a voice, neither man nor beast, had whispered his name across time. He sat up, sweat sticking his flaxen hair to his brow. Outside, the morning was quiet, too quiet. No rooster, no children laughing, no clanging of tools from the smithy. Even Epona wasn't making her usual fuss for apples. The dream had left a mark. He could feel it humming in his bones. Link rose, crossing the room to splash cold water over his face from the wash basin. On the wall hung a well-worn green tunic, passed down through generations of his family, said to have once belonged to a swordsman of legend. He hadn't worn it in years. Not since the last time he'd ventured into Faron Woods and come back with a broken arm and an even more bruised pride. But today felt different. He pulled the tunic over his head, laced up his boots and stepped outside. The village was still, unnaturally so. The cuckoos were huddled in their coops, feathers puffed, silent. A pale mist clung to the thatched roofs and twisted around the base of the great tree, ancient and towering in the village center. Something had shifted in the world overnight. His first stop was the shed behind his house. Beneath a creaky floorboard, he unearthed an old chest bound in cracked leather. Inside was the traveler's sword, simple, slightly rusted, but sharp. It had once belonged to his father, who'd patrolled the Ordona province as a watchman in his youth. Alongside it, a satchel of basic gear, a water skin, dried fruit, a handful of monster-repelling herbs, and his bow, strung but untouched for months. As he buckled the sword to his belt, something rustled outside. A figure emerged through the mist, Mayor Bo, his heavy boots silent on the path. "Link," he said, his voice low and wary. "I figured you'd feel it." "You mean the mist?" The old man nodded. "It came down from the woods late last night. The trees are wrong, Link. The birds have fled. Even the wolves are quiet." Link's hand rested on the hilt of the sword. "You think something's moving in there?" "I know it," Bo said, "but listen to me. Don't go past the Temple of Time ruins. Nothing good ever came from crossing those stones." Link looked to the tree line beyond the village, where the mist swirled thick like breath from some slumbering beast. He'd crossed them before, and the dream still echoed in his head. Find the spring, restore the seal, the shadow wakes. That was more than a dream, it was a call. "I'll be careful," Link said, but his voice carried a weight he hadn't felt in years. He turned toward the forest trail, the familiar crunch of earth beneath his boots grounding him. The woods were waiting. Whatever slept beyond the Vale, it had begun to stir. And so with sword at his hip and the first stirrings of fate in his blood, Link set off, toward the whispering woods, toward the spring, toward the shadow. Chapter 2, The Whispering Woods. The wind sighed through the trees of Faron Woods, carrying with it the scent of moss and the distant song of kikwi birds. Light filtered through the emerald canopy above, dappling the forest floor where young Link crouched beside a glimmering patch of silent princesses, rare flowers said to bloom only in places where courage lingered. He wasn't here for flowers, though. Clutching his wooden traveler's sword, he listened. The forest was too quiet. Even the ever-chattering skulltulas in the treetops had gone still. "Something's wrong," Link muttered to himself. His voice was low and steady, but a knot of unease had taken root in his stomach. He had left Orden Village at dawn, chasing rumors of a strange mist curling through the deeper woods. The mayor had warned him not to stray past the old Temple of Time ruins, but Link's dreams had told him otherwise. Night after night, he had seen visions. A glimmering spring lost in time, veiled by shadows, its waters corrupted. A haunting melody echoed in those dreams, one he recognized only in fragments, notes from Zelda's lullaby, interwoven with something older, darker. He pushed forward, past the overgrown trail, until the trees thinned and the air grew cool. A dense fog rolled between the trunks, and within it, shapes moved, low and lurching like beasts bent double. Moblins. Link ducked behind a fallen log, heart racing. The creatures wore rusted armor, bearing the crest of the long-defeated Yiga clan, a red eye smeared with black across the chest. What were they doing here? He reached for his bow, strung with a quiver of wooden arrows tipped in bokoblin bone, and waited. 3 of them. One sniffed the air and growled. "There's a Hylian here," it rasped. Its voice was wet and wrong, like it gargled river mud. "The Master's scent is on him." "Master." Link didn't wait to find out more. He stood and loosed an arrow into the creature's chest before charging the others. His blade caught one in the shoulder, sending it reeling into a mossy tree trunk. The third came at him with a crude axe, but Link rolled under the swing and drove his sword into the beast's knee. It collapsed, snarling curses in a guttural tongue. When the last moblin fell, the mist around them began to clear. The unnatural cold lifted. Link wiped his blade and stepped over the bodies. Noticing something strange, each moblin had a small crystal embedded in its chest, pulsing faintly with violet light. He touched one, and a voice echoed through his mind. "Find the spring. Restore the seal." The shadow wakes. Link staggered back, breath catching in his throat. The voice wasn't hostile, but it wasn't human either. It felt ancient, woven from the wind and stone itself, and it had called to him. He looked around, the trees now parted to reveal a forgotten path, stones worn smooth by time. Beyond the path lay the crumbling arch of the old Spring of Courage, once a sacred place in Faron's depths. But now, the waters were black, swirling with ash and oil. The statues of Furor, the goddess of courage, wept tears of obsidian. Link stepped to the edge. The surface rippled, and from its depths rose a figure cloaked in shadows, shimmering, shifting. It wore a crown of broken antlers and a robe of starlight and smoke. "I am Nialar, the waking hollow," it said. "The balance is undone, the springs have fallen silent, the old seals crack, and you, hero, bear the last breath of light." Link raised his sword. "What are you?" "A memory," the being said, "a wound, a godlet born in the dark behind the goddess's light. I was sealed long ago by those who wielded the flames of Din, the winds of Nayru, and the song of Furor. But now I stir." Before Link could speak again, the figure dissolved into mist, and a shudder ran through the forest. Trees groaned, the earth cracked. The spring of courage had awakened, but not to hope. Something was coming, and Hyrule would meet its hero once more. Chapter 3, Echoes in Stone. Link's boots sank into the soft loam as he followed the broken path deeper into Faron woods, past where even the old foragers dared tread. The trees leaned in here, silent sentinels whose gnarled branches whispered to one another in a tongue older than Hylian. Before him stood the moss-choked bones of the Temple of Time. Once a holy site linking eras, it now slouched beneath ivy and ruin. Its marble pillars, carved with Sheikah runes, leaned and cracked. The central altar, once a conduit between realms, was sunken and scarred, as if time itself had recoiled from the place. Link stepped cautiously into the open courtyard. He felt the weight of 1,000 memories pressing in. Some weren't even his. He ran his fingers over a fractured stone near the center. Embedded within was the sigil of the Triforce, split and faded. Then he saw it, a gear-shaped indentation in the ground, half buried under leaves. A puzzle mechanism. He crouched and cleared the debris, revealing 5 rotating stone rings etched with Zonai script. Link blinked. He'd seen this pattern before, in his dreams. One by one, he rotated the rings, aligning them with the rising sun as the dream had shown. With a deep rumble, the stone shifted, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. He hesitated only for a moment before lighting a blue flame torch from his pouch and stepping down. The chamber below was vast, an ancient sanctuary untouched by time. Its walls depicted the history of Hyrule, the goddesses Din, Nayru, and Furor, the birth of the Triforce, the rise and fall of ancient kingdoms. But what caught his eye was a massive mural on the far wall. It showed the 4 sacred springs: courage, wisdom, power, and spirit, each linked by golden lines to a central pool surrounded by black vines and stars. Beneath it, a title carved in Sheikah, the Eternal Spring. Link's eyes widened. This wasn't in any legend he'd heard. Suddenly, a flicker of motion. From the shadows emerged a flickering Sheikah spirit, clad in a faded cloak, one eye glowing blue. "You are the last to come," the specter said, voice echoing like water over stone. "The spring lies fractured, the four must be cleansed before the fifth can rise." Link stepped forward. "What is the fifth spring?" The spirit bowed its head. "A well of balance, born when Hyrule was first shaped. When the shadow was sealed, it was broken into four, each watched by a guardian. But now the shadow wakes, and the guardians are lost." A rumble shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling. The spirit extended its hand. "You must find what remains. This map will guide you." From the air, a glowing map floated into Link's palm. It marked 4 regions: Lanayru Mountain, Eldin Volcano, Gerudo Desert, and Farron Hollow, each bearing a crest of one of the springs. At the center, veiled by fog, was a 5th mark, the Eternal Spring. Before he could speak, the spirit began to fade. "Beware the Hollow King. He walks where no light dwells." Then the torch flickered and died. When Link climbed out of the chamber and returned to the open air, the sun had shifted. The mist was thicker. The world was darker. But his path was clear. He would journey first to Lanayru, to the Spring of Wisdom, nestled high on the mountains of the goddess. He secured the map and looked skyward. Far above the trees, he could see the snowy peaks glittering in the distance, crowned with ancient clouds. There, the first trial awaited. And so, Link set out, unaware that high in the mountain winds, a ghostly figure watched him through a mirror of shadow, whispering his name. Chapter 4: The Breathless Vale. The road to Lanayru was long and cruel. Link's breath fogged in the chill as he ascended the snow-swept trail, winding up the mountains of the goddess. The wind howled like a wounded beast, tearing at his cloak, and snow hissed underfoot. Ancient banners of Hylia's sigil snapped in the gale, remnants of pilgrimages long forgotten. Yet the cold wasn't what gnawed at him. It was the silence. There were no geese overhead, no wolves crying out in the dusk. Even the trees were strange, gnarled and white as bone, their limbs swaying as though listening. At last, he reached a high ridge overlooking a shimmering valley hidden within the peaks. Wisdom's Hollow, home to the Spring of Wisdom. He remembered this place from legend, how Zelda once prayed here before confronting her fate. Now it stood in eerie stillness, the water frozen solid, glowing with an unnatural blue sheen. Frost curled across the cracked marble, and icicles hung from the sacred statue of the goddess Nayru, her face veiled in hoarfrost and shadow. Link stepped forward, drawn by something pulsing in the air. As his boots touched the frost-laced stone, the world around him shimmered. A sharp chime echoed. Suddenly he stood in the same hollow, but it was alive, verdant, summer. Birdsong filled the air. The water sparkled under golden light. And there, at the base of the statue, knelt Princess Zelda, clad in white, hair gleaming, her voice lifted in prayer. "Please," she whispered, "let me be strong enough." Link froze. He called her name. She did not respond. As he stepped forward, her image shimmered and turned. Her eyes met his, but they weren't Zelda's. They were glassy, empty. "Why didn't you save me, Link?" she asked, voice hollow. Link drew his sword, suddenly aware that the vision was wrong. The figure now stood, her hands blooming into long, serpentine claws, her form elongating, warping. The illusion cracked, revealing a grotesque creature beneath, a wraith echo forged from twisted memory. It hissed, its voice splintering into many. "We are the regrets she cast away, the doubts buried in the spring, and now you shall drown in them." It lunged. Link rolled beneath the strike, sliding across the ice. He drew an arrow, igniting the tip with blue flame, and fired, striking the creature in the chest. It screamed, flaring with shadow. The battle raged across the hollow. Illusions blinked in and out, Zelda's voice, the sound of a harp, visions of ruined castles and laughing children. Each tried to twist Link's focus, to make him doubt, but he pressed on. He remembered Zelda's real voice, soft but unyielding, her gaze, full of fire, her strength. With a final strike of his blade, blessed with a shard of ancient light from the spring's seal, Link cleaved through the wraith echo. It wailed, disintegrating into mist and falling snow. The silence returned. The ice began to melt, the unnatural chill lifting. The statue of Nayru gleamed once more, her hands cupped as if offering something unseen. At her feet, a soft glow pulsed. Link approached. There, resting in the thawed waters, was a crystal shaped like a teardrop, shimmering with sapphire light. The voice from the temple echoed in his mind. "The first has awakened. 3 remain." He reached out. As his fingers touched the crystal, warmth surged through him. A memory not his own filled his heart. Zelda standing here in the moonlight, speaking a silent vow to protect Hyrule. Then the vision faded. Link rose, breath slow, heart steady. He turned his eyes to the horizon. Next was the volcanic spine of Eldin, where the spring of power boiled in fire and fury. And somewhere, far below the mountains, the shadow of Nealar stirred, watching, waiting. Chapter 5: The Sentinel's Chains. The air thickened with heat long before the mountain came into view. Link shaded his eyes as the peak of Death Mountain loomed ahead, bleeding smoke into the crimson sky. Eldin Canyon lay before him, withered earth, choked with cinders and rivers of slow-moving magma. The path wound like a scar through cracked rock, dotted with steam vents, and the skeletal remains of ancient war machines long buried in stone. He pressed onward. The spring of power lay deep within Goron territory, nestled inside a lava-shrouded crater where even the Gorons no longer tread. The old legends warned of a guardian there, one older than the divine beasts, slumbering beneath stone since the age of the Sky Era. But now, that guardian had stirred, and Link had no choice but to answer its call. As he neared the base of the mountain, a violent tremor shook the earth beneath him. The ground rumbled like a growl from deep within the mountain's heart. Then a shriek split the air, metallic, mournful. Something was awake. Link's grip tightened on his sword as he pressed forward, passing through the narrowing canyon that led into the heart of the mountain's belly. The ground trembled again, and the distant echo of the cry rolled over the canyon, setting his nerves on edge. He stepped carefully onto a shattered stone bridge that arched across a yawning channel of molten lava. The heat was suffocating, and the smell of sulfur and burning stone stung his nostrils. But the sound of grinding stone overhead caused his heart to skip a beat. The bridge crumbled beneath him, falling into the magma below. With a running leap, Link barely made it to the far side, landing with a roll that sent a jolt of pain through his arm. He quickly regained his footing, eyes darting around the canyon rimmed with old Sheikah conduits, their lights flickering weakly beneath layers of ash. Something wasn't right here. The temperature had shifted. The overwhelming heat of the mountain had vanished, replaced by an unnatural cold. He narrowed his eyes. This wasn't natural. This was suppression, a manipulation of elemental balance. Someone, or something, was trying to keep the spring of power sealed away, and Link knew that if he did not reach it soon, the threat would only grow stronger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of climbing and leaping over volcanic fissures, he reached the entrance to the spring of power, a blackened colonnade carved into the mountain's belly, flanked by statues of Din, the goddess of flame and strength. Yet as Link approached, he felt an unsettling absence in the air. The spring, usually aglow with divine energy, was dark, a still pool of molten glass that shimmered with a sickly crimson hue. Link stepped cautiously into the chamber. The floor hummed underfoot, the faint vibrations tickling his senses. Then, with a deep rumble, the central dais split open. From the molten core rose a monstrous construct of stone, steel, and shadow, towering and serpentine, with glowing eyes and a burning Sheikah emblem fused to its chest. A voice echoed from within the construct, ancient and grieving. "I am Moldugan Sentinel, guardian of strength. I was forged to protect the flame. Now I am bound in chains of silence." Chains of darkness erupted from the spring, tethering the construct to corrupted runes pulsing along the walls. The dark magic of Nealar's curse had seeped into the sacred machinery, twisting it into a servant of shadow. The sentinel reared, molten plates shifting and fire gouted from its mouth. Link barely had time to react, diving to the side as the chamber erupted into flame. The heat was unbearable, the air thick with smoke and ash. He had to act fast. Link sprinted between the pillars of the chamber, drawing his bow mid-run. He loosed a bomb arrow, striking one of the corrupted runes along the far wall. The explosion rocked the chamber, cracking the stone and disrupting one of the chains that bound the sentinel. The massive guardian howled, twisting its body as molten rock shifted and spilled from its body, a vision of flame and fury. The sentinel charged. Link sprinted across a rising platform, dodging flame jets that erupted from the construct's arms. He leaped onto a crumbling beam that arced above the spring and launched himself at the second rune, slashing it with his sword. Blue sparks leaped from the impact, and the second chain snapped with a satisfying crack. The Sentinel screamed, thrashing violently. 2 more chains remained. The Sentinel took to the air, propelled by magma jets beneath its arms, circling the chamber like a demonic dragonfly. Link barely had time to think before it dove toward him, fire gouting from its maw. Instinct took over, and he grabbed his hookshot, firing it toward the creature's tail. The metal hook latched onto the molten plates, and Link swung upward, climbing fast as the Sentinel flailed beneath him. The heat was unbearable, but his resolve burned hotter. He reached the final rune on the back of the Sentinel. With one final effort, Link drove his blade deep into the rune's core. The blade vibrated as sparks of magic pulsed from the wound. "Sorry, big guy," Link muttered under his breath. With a shriek that shook the very stones beneath them, the Sentinel collapsed. Its molten form crashed into the spring, its massive body crumbling into the pool of molten glass. A pulse of red light surged through the chamber, filling every crack and crevice with blinding energy. The chains shattered. The spring hissed, glowing with life once more. Lava flowed again, and the shrine was bathed in a radiant crimson hue. The molten core of the Sentinel was no more. The construct, now still, raised its head, its glowing eyes focused on Link. "Thank you, hero," it said. Its voice was calm now, devoid of the grief that had filled it before. "The shadow slipped through the cracks of time. I failed to hold it, but the flame is yours again." From the center of the spring, a new light shone. The second divine tear rose, glowing red like a ruby kissed by dawn. Link approached slowly, his heart thudding in his chest. As his fingers brushed the crystal, a memory surged through him, not his, but Din's. A blazing battlefield, a temple burning, a golden triangle splitting apart in the sky, the springs shattering, scattered to the corners of the realm. And above it all, a hollow-eyed figure wrapped in starlight and ash, Nealar, the godlet of absence, whispering false promises to a dying king. Then the vision was gone. Link fell to one knee, breath ragged, the weight of the divine tears pressing down on him like a physical force. The second spring had been restored. 2 more remained. He looked west, toward the endless dunes of Gerudo Desert, where ancient spirits whispered beneath the sands. Whatever trials lay ahead, he would face them, because the world was changing, the springs were waking, and the shadow was nearly here. Chapter 6: The Weeping Sands. The desert was unkind. Link squinted against the glare as he trudged through the searing heat of Gerudo Desert, his boots kicking up golden dust with every step. The sand shimmered in waves beneath the unforgiving sun, and distant cliffs seemed to shift like illusions. Somewhere beneath this ancient wasteland, buried beneath time and memory, lay the Spring of Spirit, lost even to the Gerudo archives. He passed the stone gates of Gerudo Town, greeted with brief nods and cautious glances. Chieftain Riju had provided him with a map carved onto sun-bleached bone, a relic passed down from the time of Urbosa, pointing to a temple long thought swallowed by the dunes, the Weeping Hollow. It was said the sand itself cried where the spring lay hidden. Link rode a borrowed sand seal, the beast gliding over dunes like a boat over waves. The sun dipped lower and the air began to cool. That's when he saw them. Ruins. Half-submerged columns of green stone jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Strange markings glowed faintly in the fading light. Gerudo glyphs, overlaid with a second, more ancient script, Twili, the Weeping Hollow. Link dismounted, his seal barking softly before gliding back toward the dunes. The temple entrance yawned before him, stone steps spiraling down into darkness. Inside, the atmosphere shifted immediately, as though the very air thickened with memory. Torches burst to life with violet flame, casting eerie shadows across the walls. The floor was polished to a perfect mirror-like sheen, reflecting his every step. In the center of the vast circular chamber was a pool of starlit water, surrounded by statues of spirits with veiled faces, each one frozen in time. The weight of the past pressed against him. A voice echoed, gentle, feminine, but not Zelda's. "You seek the spring of spirit, yet you carry doubts heavier than stone. Leave behind what burdens you." The voice came from nowhere and everywhere. The moment Link stepped forward, The mirror-like floor shimmered, and his own reflection rose to meet him. Not just a mirrored form, but an idealized shadow, clad in dark robes and wielding a sword of pale flame. It spoke with his voice, but twisted. "You call yourself a hero? You followed orders, failed her, hid while the world burned." The echo of self lunged. Their blades clashed, steel on spectral flame. Link fought fiercely, but the shadow anticipated every move. It wasn't strength he lacked, it was certainty. Every swing of the blade brought a new accusation from the doppelganger. "Where were you when the castle fell? Why didn't you save her? Are you even worthy to wield the Triforce?" Link faltered, his resolve weakening. His knees hit the stone, and for a moment, doubt threatened to swallow him whole. But then he remembered Zelda's strength, her unwavering courage. Her belief in him, not as a weapon, but as a person. The courage she had shown when everything seemed lost. He stood slowly, his sword sheathed, though his body trembled with the weight of those memories. "I don't have all the answers," he said aloud, his voice steadying as he spoke, "but I'm still standing, and I will protect Hyrule." The echo paused, its phantom eyes narrowing in thought. Then it smiled, and with that smile, it dissolved into light. The pool before him shimmered and changed, no longer a stagnant pool, but a spring once more. Water flowed again, crystalline and pure. The statues wept, their faces tilted toward the basin, their tears now flowing freely into the water. The room felt warmer, lighter, as though the very air had been released from a long-held breath. From the waters rose the third divine tear, glowing soft violet, pulsing gently with spiritual resonance. Link approached, his heart still thudding from the battle with his own reflection. As his fingers brushed against the crystal, a new memory surged through him. Furore, the youngest of the goddesses, weaving life from song and soul, a spring at the world's center, where spirit and form met in harmony. Then, a shattering, shadows, a mirror broken into 5. And at its heart, Nihilar, the godlet of absence, whispering to a dying sage, "Let go, and I will make the world quiet." The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Link gasping for breath, a lingering chill crawling up his spine. He looked down at the tear in his palm, its soft violet glow pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. 3 springs now stirred with life. One remained. The spring of courage, hidden deep within the lush depths of Faron Hollow, the very forest where his journey had begun. Link exhaled, the weight of his task settling onto his shoulders. He turned back toward the desert night, where the stars twinkled overhead and the winds whispered in mournful song. The quiet desolation of the desert had only sharpened his sense of purpose. The end was drawing near. Chapter 7, Silence Stands Before War. Faron greeted Link with birdsong and dew. The scent of wild orchids, moss, and rain hung heavy in the humid air. Faron Hollow was ancient, older even than the temples. Trees the width of towers reached skyward, their roots tangled like sleeping serpents. Here the world was green and dreaming, and time moved like mist. Link made his way through the tangled jungle on foot, following whispers of wind and instinct more than any map. He had no need of signs, the forest remembered him. Birds watched from the branches, fireflies drifted in luminous clouds. Koroks peered from behind leaves and stone, giggling as they vanished when he turned. But something was wrong. The closer he came to the heart of the forest, the quieter it grew. Birds ceased singing, the leaves stilled, even the insects went silent. The weight of an unnatural stillness hung in the air like a suffocating fog. Then, a familiar voice echoed in his mind. "Link, I'm here, Zelda." Her voice trembled, not with fear but with effort, strain. She was near, and in danger. His heart quickened, a surge of urgency racing through him. He broke into a run, leaping over fallen trees, ducking beneath tangled vines. The jungle, once full of life, now seemed suffocatingly quiet, as though the very earth was holding its breath. Then the forest opened into a glade, a perfect circle of stillness, where a pool lay black and motionless, untouched by wind or light. At its center stood Zelda, or something wearing her face. Her gown flowed like water, her eyes wide and unblinking. She turned as Link approached, a soft smile curling on her lips as if welcoming him. "I waited for you," she said, voice like birdsong. "Isn't this peace what you wanted?" Link's pulse quickened, his grip on the spirit blade tightening as his instincts screamed that this was not his friend, not his princess. "You're not her." The smile faltered. Zelda, or the creature wearing her form, tilted its head, its expression melting into something darker, more primal. "You always ruin it," it hissed. She begged for silence. I gave it to her. The pool began to churn, its still waters rippling as shadows gathered. From the depths, a massive form emerged, a creature twisted and ancient, its body a grotesque amalgamation of roots, shadow, and bone. Its face was that of a dragon, its body serpentine and coiling with deadly grace. It had the voice of 100 sorrowful songs, each note carrying the weight of ages. "Courage is not without consequence," the creature intoned, its voice deep and sorrowful. "Doubt festers, memory deceives. You, hero, are the final crack in the world's fragile peace." It struck. Link barely had time to react before the creature's tendrils lashed out, roots tearing through the earth and spiraling toward him like serpents. The ground erupted with thorned vines, and the jungle itself seemed to come alive, attacking him as he dodged and weaved. He leapt into the air, his sword flashing as he severed the vines that whipped toward him. The battle spilled across the glade, trees splintering, stone cracking under the fury of the combat. Virith, the verdant shade, coiled and struck again, its massive body sending shockwaves through the air as it roared. Link gritted his teeth, never stopping, never retreating. Every cut he made, every vine he severed, brought him closer to the spring's heart, where Zelda's true form knelt, half submerged in the black water, her eyes closed, lips murmuring forgotten words. She was trapped in a dream binding, a spiritual loop conjured by Nylar to hold her still, quiet, obedient. "Zelda," Link called, his voice ragged. "Wake up!" Virith howled in fury, slamming its great body into the ground in an attempt to crush him. Link was knocked backward, his ribs bruised and breath stolen from him. His sword flew from his hand, skidding across the stone floor of the glade. For a moment, he thought all was lost. But then, a golden light shimmered at the edge of the spring. Zelda's eyes fluttered open, glowing with ancient power, a radiant light pulsing from within her. Her form radiated warmth and clarity, casting away the darkness that had bound her. She raised her hand, and in an instant, the illusion shattered. The shadowy form of Virith crumbled to the ground in a pile of fading ash. The waters of the spring cleared, the glade blossomed with life once more, and the oppressive silence lifted. Link, breathless and covered in dirt and sweat, stumbled to his feet. Zelda stepped from the spring, her presence like a beacon in the night. Behind her, the final divine tear rose from the waters, shining with a light so bright it seemed to outshine the sun itself, a new dawn rising in her wake. "I remember everything," she said quietly, her voice filled with awe. "The springs, the goddesses, what Nylar truly is." Link watched, captivated, as she turned toward him, her eyes steady, filled with knowledge of the battle yet to come. He caught the tear in his hands as it descended, its warmth filling him with a sense of peace and power he hadn't felt before. As it touched his skin, a surge of visions overwhelmed him. The Triforce split in three, its golden light scattering like shattered glass. Then a fourth force, alien uninvited, loomed beyond the Vale. Nylar was not a god, not truly. He was the void left behind, a remnant of an ancient conflict older than Hyrule itself. The void had been forgotten, buried beneath the weight of time. Nihilar had waited for the springs to sleep. He had waited for Zelda's light to dim. But now, all four springs were awake, the balance was restored, and Nihilar knew it. From deep beneath the earth, something screamed. The ground cracked. Shadows poured upward like ink spilled across the sky, blotting out the stars. The very air quivered with dark power, and the land itself seemed to groan in response. Zelda turned to Link, her expression calm but filled with urgency. "We must go to Temple Remnis," she said, her voice firm, as though she had already accepted the battle that awaited them. Link nodded. There was no turning back now. The final battle had begun. Chapter 8, The Forgotten Heart of Hyrule, Temple Remnis. The wind howled as they crossed the scorched fields of Citadel Ruin, now just ash and shattered stone. The skies above had darkened unnaturally, though no storm brewed. Shadows danced across the clouds like ink in water, writhing without light or shape. Zelda led the way, her hand glowing faintly with the returned power of the springs. Where she stepped, grass bloomed, briefly, defiantly. Link walked beside her, spirit blade strapped across his back, all four divine tears secured in an ancient Sheikah casing at his hip. He could feel them pulsing, eager, even fearful. They were close. Ahead, set into the bones of a cliff carved before memory, lay a jagged cleft, the maw of Remnis, the entrance to the final temple. No maps showed this place, no stories told of it. Not even the royal archives whispered its name, yet Zelda knew it well. It was sealed during the Sky Era, she said softly. Long before the Triforce found its bearers, the goddesses themselves entombed it. Why? Link asked. She looked at him, pain in her eyes, because they made a mistake. As they passed through the entrance, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt thick, as though the very world around them held its breath. Temple Remnis was unlike any place Link had ever seen. There were no golden walls or divine mosaics, only endless corridors of obsidian, slick with condensation, etched with sigils that shimmered when viewed from the corner of the eye. The very stones seemed to recoil from light. Zelda led him deeper, her voice low and reverent. This was where the world was meant to end, before the goddesses chose to begin it. She touched a wall and it sang, a single, pure note that resonated in Link's chest. Their first creation was not light or law, but possibility. That possibility took form. It became curious. It sought stillness. Not peace. Not balance. Just absence. Link swallowed. Nihilar, Zelda nodded. He isn't a god. He's what was left behind when they chose not to erase everything. And now he wants to finish what they did not. They continued through the darkened corridors, the stone walls growing tighter, the air colder, as though the temple itself was alive and aware of their intrusion. At the end of the passage stood a massive door, a ring of stone suspended in the air, slowly turning. Runes spun along its surface, aligning like a keyhole waiting for something ancient to be remembered. Link stepped forward, placing the divine tears into the recesses carved into the floor. One by one, they lit up. Red, power; blue, wisdom; green, courage; violet, spirit. The ring began to glow with a deep pulsing light, a rumbling reverberating through the stone. With a deep tectonic groan, the chamber opened before them. Inside the temple's inner sanctum, the very air felt different. It was a void, an impossibly large chamber suspended in a sea of shadow, where stars blinked in and out of existence. There was no floor, no sky, just floating platforms of carved stone and flickering memories. The sense of scale was overwhelming, the distance infinite, and at its center, a throne of absence. No figure sat upon it, yet something was undeniably present. A voice like a whisper through bone echoed from every direction. You brought them back. Foolish children. You woke the springs. You cling to chaos, to choice, to pain. Why? Zelda stepped forward, regal despite the growing pressure in the air. Because we live. The shadows trembled. You are noise, the voice said. You are fire in a dry forest. End yourselves, and I will grant you eternity without pain. Link raised the spirit blade. No. The throne flickered, and a shape emerged. Not a man, not a beast, but a ripple in reality. A jagged void stitched into the world like a wound, flanked by wings made of ash, and a face forever shifting between familiar and forgotten. Nihilar. He reached toward them, and the chamber collapsed. Link and Zelda were thrown backward onto a platform of stone as tendrils of void lashed out. Pillars shattered. Memories rained like glass, fragments of the past, of the Sky Islands, of Hyrule's many eras, all swirling in the storm of Nihilar's awakening. You carry echoes, Nihilar boomed. Let me silence them. Link dove, his blade clashing with a tendril of shadow. Zelda summoned a barrier of golden light, pushing the void back. But for every wound they made, Nihilar grew larger, stronger. He fed on fear, on doubt, on memory. And then Link understood, this wasn't a battle of strength. It was a battle of identity. They couldn't fight him here, not yet. Zelda, he shouted, we need to draw him out, force him into the light. She nodded, sweat beading on her brow. I can open a path, but you'll have to hold him. Link gritted his teeth, then let him come. Zelda raised the 4 tiers high. Light burst from them. 4 beams of divine essence piercing the darkness, forming a circle of power around the throne. The temple groaned as reality began to split. Nihilar shrieked, recoiling. No, you will not bring meaning to this place. But it was too late. The world shattered, again, and they fell together into the next chapter. Chapter 9, The Silent Field. There was no sound, no wind, no breath, not even the beat of a heart. Link stood on what resembled a field of white marble, cracked and stretching into an infinite nothingness. Above him, a sky without stars. Beneath him, nothing but mirrored fragments of memory. Zelda hovered nearby, her cloak shifting despite the still air. The four divine tears orbited her like moons, shedding soft, pulsing light. "We're not in Hyrule anymore," she said, her voice echoing in a place where echoes shouldn't exist. Link looked around. In the distance, pieces of old kingdoms floated in midair. Fragments of Skyloft, twilight ruins, a piece of the Temple of Time, a still-burning Hatino village house. And ahead of them, at the center of it all, a great chasm of lightless dark from which Nealar rose. Nealar no longer wore a single form. He was a shifting amalgamation of horrors. He was Ganondorf's crown, Xant's eyes, Demise's laugh without a mouth. He was the void between creation, given will, and anger. "You persist," Nealar rasped, his voice collapsing reality with every syllable. "The music of your world has played far too long." The spirit blade in Link's hand pulsed, as if recognizing an old enemy, one it wasn't meant to defeat, but hold at bay. Zelda raised her hand. Her voice was firm and unwavering. "Endless silence is not peace. We choose to be flawed. We choose to be alive." Nealar's form pulsed violently in response. "You were chosen to die. Let the echoes fade." And with that he struck. Tendrils of nothingness surged toward them. Link dashed forward, blade singing as he met the first blow head-on. His feet barely held ground against the force, but he pressed on. Every strike felt like swinging against the concept of forgetting itself. Steel met void, memory met unbeing. Meanwhile, Zelda chanted in a language older than Hyrule's hills. The divine tears spun faster around her, forming a prism of divine energy. "He's bound to the memory of the springs," she cried. "We must unmake his anchor here." Link leapt onto a floating shard of the great Deku Tree's canopy, dodging a lance of dark. He hurled a bomb flower into Nealar's chest. Light exploded, tearing away a piece of the void. Beneath it was nothing, a wound in the world, and yet he could hurt him. Zelda lifted her arms. The tears of power and spirit fused, forming a crimson-violet flame. She sent it arcing through the sky. Nealar shrieked as it struck. His form trembled. "Fools!" he roared. "You undo your own foundation." But something had changed. The sky, empty moments ago, now showed fragments of memory. The moment Link first received the Master Sword, Zelda's childhood laughter in Hyrule Castle, the moonlit fields of Lon Lon Ranch, the wind-carved peaks of Hebra, the memories of the world were pushing back. Link gritted his teeth and charged again, blade raised. Nalar lunged, and this time Link plunged the spirit blade deep into the void's chest. The blade sang. Nealar howled, fracturing. Zelda landed beside Link, the final two divine tears, wisdom and courage, fusing into a spear of white gold light. Together they struck. The silent field exploded in light, not destruction, reclamation. Nalar was pulled apart, not killed, but dispersed, his form shredded into whispers, scattered into the memories of those who still lived. He screamed as he faded, not in pain, but in disbelief. "You chose this? A world that ends? A heart that breaks? A story that dies?" Zelda whispered, her voice now woven into the very threads of the void. "Yes, because we begin again." And with that, the silent field shattered. When Link opened his eyes, he lay at the center of Hyrule Field, beneath the midday sun. Zelda stood beside him, alive, whole, glowing faintly with the tears. Final light. Around them, the earth healed. Trees that had withered bloomed anew. Rivers flowed clear. The skies no longer trembled. The divine springs, though distant, pulsed with contentment. Nealar was gone. The silence was over. Chapter 10. A Song Remembered. It was spring again in Hyrule. Not the false spring, the sickly stillness that had once draped the land like a funeral shroud, but a true one. Warm rains, budding trees. Birds returned from far shores, calling across skies that no longer flickered with shadow. The divine springs, now restored, had quieted, not gone, but at peace. The sacred waters once again flowed freely, across Zora's domain, into the rivers near Kakariko, and beneath the roots of the great Deku Tree, who now stirred from his long slumber with a groaning yawn and gentle blessing upon the land. Link stood on the cliff above Orden Village, wind brushing through his hair. The spirit blade had been returned to the grove, buried beneath a weeping tree that only bloomed when the stars were out. Its purpose was fulfilled. His own, still unfolding. He wore simple clothes again, no armor, no Sheikah gear, just a traveler's tunic and a swordless scabbard. He wasn't restless. For once, he felt still. Below, the children of the village played near the stream. One wore a wooden sword. Another tried climbing a tree, shouting something about hunting a Lionel. He smiled. From the forest behind him, Zelda approached. She no longer bore the aura of divinity. Not entirely. With the divine tears returned to the earth, their power had settled back into the world itself. But something had changed in her. An ease, perhaps. A burden lifted. Zelda sat beside him, looking down at the fields of Hyrule, green and whole again. "They're rebuilding in Akkala," she said. "Hateno has new walls. Even the ruins around the forgotten temple are growing flowers." Link didn't speak, but she didn't mind. She'd grown fluent in the silence between them. After a moment, she continued, "I've decided I won't rule from the castle. Not for now. The people know what to do without a throne watching." He looked at her, curious. She smiled. "I think Hyrule needs less ruling and more listening. Maybe a new kind of kingdom, one without a crown." He nodded, approved. She turned to him. "And what about you?" Link looked out again. Wind stirred the grass below. After a pause, he said softly, "I think I'll walk." She laughed, a quiet, real thing. "Of course you will." Across the land, change took root. The Rito once more soared over snowless peaks. Gorons rebuilt a new village atop the cooled remnants of Death Mountain. Sheikah monks, long silent, emerged from their ancient shrines to teach, not just war or technology, but memory and humility. Even the Yiga clan, broken by Nihilar's influence, sought atonement, tending forgotten groves and old battlefields. The divine springs were left unguarded now, open to all. Pilgrims came not seeking power, but reflection. The waters gave no visions anymore, only clarity. And throughout it all, a song began to spread. A new one. A melody played on ocarina and harp and wind. A song remembered. That night, Link wandered alone to the edge of Lake Hylia, where the stars reflected perfectly on the water's surface. He sat beneath the statue of the goddess, fingers brushing the water. A faint glow pulsed beneath the surface, just for a moment. Not a warning, not a call to action, just a heartbeat. The world was still, and it was enough.